This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
Welcome back to the show. Today, we are exploring a profound journey of evolution with Lisa Johnson, a family psychotherapist and author of her upcoming memoirs, My Relationship with Oprah, My Own Evolution of Restorative Justice. You know, we often hear the terms victim and survivor, but my guest today focuses on the next stage, thriver. Lisa is a psychotherapist who has spent decades helping families, but her most difficult case study might have been her own life. From witnessing a traumatic crime in 1980 to navigating a broken justice system and finally confronting her own family patterns through the Hoffman process, she is here with us today to discuss how she became her own boss in business and in spirit. Lisa, thank you for joining us again. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm great. It's a pleasure to be here today. Unfortunately, my sister Edie, who we talked about last time, who's supported me throughout this story, isn't able to come today. She's, as we mentioned before, has Parkinson's disease, and like my grandmother did, as a matter of fact, on my dad's side. And she knew that, any day now she might be feeling a little fuzzy or it just might be too much. So she has to conserve her energy for what's in front of her. She is in California with my other sisters celebrating Thanksgiving this week. And I'll talk a little bit later about this, but I'm not welcome at that everybody that I'm related to is in California this week having Thanksgiving, and I'm not welcome there. But I will tell more about that when I get to the later part of the story and how we came to that through my stories. But the reality is my sister Edie has, since the day I was born, she is my oldest sister Edie has supported me and my relationship with Oprah. Even as I went to private practice, she continued, and I wasn't even watching the show anymore. She continued every year to send me an O magazine
Oh,
for my birthday. The subscription, my birthday is in January, so it's a great, January gift is to give somebody a magazine subscription. So when I was in private practice, I would have O magazine in my waiting room every year, courtesy of my sister, who kept me connected with that whole relationship with Oprah
wow.
thing that we're talking about throughout the story.
Oh,
So
this
Edie
story.
really has been that for me a big part of that link, and she continues to be a loving support to me every day today.
Beautiful.
So.
Well, your story is really incredibly layered. You've, written about how you learned to put your struggles into your vocation. But let's start out with the concept of restorative justice, if we can. Because for you, this wasn't just a theory, it was a lived experience that began decades after a crime was committed against you.
Yeah, and as we talked about in some of the other episodes, in 1980, I was at work at a gas station and I was assaulted. And over the years, while I was in undergrad going to school to become a counselor, they both went to prison because we testified in court and they were both sentenced to, I thought justice had been served. But it wasn't until later, much later, when I had moved to New Mexico, that the DNA technology became available, and it didn't match either of the men that were convicted of the crime. And so in 1996, while I was here in New Mexico starting my own family, the Innocence Project took on Larry May's case, the older assailant, and sued the Hammond Police Department for wrongful imprisonment. And
That,
that's one, at the time I was working at a high school that focused on restorative justice, learning
ah,
and teaching people about how to change the way we approach the justice system. And it was fascinating to me to have this parallel experience at the same time,
yeah.
while we're teaching students to take responsibility for their mistakes and make corrections in the community to make the world a safer place. Here I was being addressed the idea that perhaps the men who had gone to prison for my crimes, maybe the evidence wasn't quite right. And
Yeah.
so it was a fascinating turn of twist.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was earth-shattering. I mean, you mentioned in your writings that this turned into a real Oprah-style feature presentation. So how did you react to the news that the system had failed?
Well, I had seen programs before about, the Innocence Project and people being exonerated for crimes that they hadn't been committed. And I was all for that. And when I was approached to say that the DNA didn't match, I let it out that I had been hypnotized by the police department, the detectives, to enhance my memory. My father was there with me as a witness to that to make sure I wasn't manipulated. And there was a lot of other evidence from the defense that supported things like the fact that this assailant had a gold tooth exactly at the same place where I spoke of in my testimony. My evidence was left in the car. There's so many things that link both assailants to the crime. The fact that they didn't leave DNA evidence behind didn't convince me that the wrong person had gone. But I did choose, paid our own way. My dad paid his own way coming back from Sacramento, and we both went back to Chicago for the deposition because I believed in the justice system, and I truly believed that if all the evidence was presented, that justice would be served. I don't know if I really believe that this looks to me like retaliative justice. I don't know that I'm not convinced the wrong people went to prison. I am convinced that the detectives manipulated the evidence and kept information from the defense that was a violation of their rights. And so, to some extent, that needed to be addressed.
Yeah,
And I was there to tell the truth.
yeah, you said because you had no interest in sending an innocent man to prison. So you really had a vivid memory
No,
of the
and it,
assault, you say, right?
Mhm. Yes, I had a very vivid memory of the assault because of the hypnosis. And then subsequently, when I was trained in EMDR, my confidence and security and feeling of ability to stay grounded as I talk about the experience became easier and easier, which was evidenced by identifying the pictures that were displayed when they came. For me, restorative justice means accountability. And my father was standing by me throughout this process. He wanted to make sure that the police, that the all the evidence supported that he was there to make sure that my memory was not manipulated, which you can do with hypnosis and you can do with EMDR. That's
Wow.
the point, is to manipulate your memory so that you're not afraid anymore.
Yeah.
But the police did not manipulate the facts of the evidence. What they did is they helped my brain relax so that I could remember things more effectively.
But
But in
you
the
also
end,
say, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Mays eventually was awarded millions of dollars for wrongful imprisonment, and I recognize that the justice system. I don't know if I would agree that justice was served, but I understand the reasoning behind the decision. But
Got
it
it.
isn't restorative justice. It's retaliative justice.
As you mentioned,
It's
because the state tried to
payback.
charge them, now you said with the related murder from the same night, right?
Exactly. And years later, when they did try to charge Mays with the murder after he had been released from prison and was awarded $9 million, something had happened where he had suffered multiple strokes and was examined and found to be unfit to stand trial. So Mays was eliminated as somebody that Hammond Police Department could retaliate
Wow.
back against because of his own suffering of the strokes and his inability to stand trial again for the crimes that he had committed, not just against me, but also the Hammond Police Department and a Kentucky Fried Chicken robbery and hitchhikers who had been sexually assaulted.
Wow. Wow. All right.
All in the space of the time when I was involved in my crime in the 1980s.
Now, you mentioned this legal drama obviously was unfolding in the background, and you were also fighting battles in your professional life. So let's talk about you transitioning from agency work to the private practice. This was in 2004. That's why we're going to go to this next section called My Own Boss, referencing the Oprah Winfrey Network. And what did that independence mean to you, Lisa?
Well, as I was coming to New Mexico and I had left my job at Amy Beale High School because they had turned down my application to finish my dissertation with educational leave. And so I had to make a decision about was I going to finish my dissertation or was I going to let it drop? I didn't think I could work full time as a therapist and finish my dissertation at the same time. And at the same time, my son, who was 18 months old, his childcare provider said she had to quit and subsequently died.
Ah,
And so I lost my child provider. But I was able to adapt by going into private practice and scheduling my life around when I could find childcare for my son, and which I was able to do just blocks away from the elementary school that he was going to go to. And I found an office another block away from the elementary school that he was going to go to called the Father and Family Center. And I was able to set up a private practice there. That's when my sister was subscribing me to O Magazine. And I was able to get my private practice up and running. I just pivoted into private practice, which became very, I don't know, for some people, they're like, oh, it's very hard to start a private practice. But for me, my work just blossomed. I
yeah,
absolutely love working for myself. My
yeah.
boss really understands me. And I really, I'm so glad I knew how to do it, be a therapist before I ever tried to be a businesswoman, but I was able to pivot and do a really good job. One of the things, though, that was really difficult that I faced shortly after was a massive shakeup in New Mexico, where the behavioral health system was attacked by our governor back in 2013.
And the Medicaid audit.
Yes, yes. So there is a documentary film, and I will put a link in the comments to my YouTube channel and such. It's called The Shakeup. There's a documentary film about the 2013 attack on behavioral health here in New Mexico. At the time, the governor accused 14 of the largest agencies, behavioral health agencies in the state of New Mexico, fraud. And as it turned out, they froze all the payments, including mine. I had thousands of dollars recuperated, like taken back from my ongoing practice. They just didn't pay me for the work I was providing because they accused us of keeping funds that were the what it wasn't. I found out after months. It took months for me to figure this out. But thousands of dollars of my income was kept because the insurance company 6 years ago had paid me the wrong amount for some of the clients that I had been seeing through Medicaid. And those were the kinds of mistakes that the insurance company made that required the governor to accuse the state, the largest behavioral health agencies of fraud and seize their Medicaid assets with which basically shut down most of the behavioral health care providers throughout the state of New Mexico in 2013. It was very devastating to our behavioral health care system. We already had about a third of the providers that we needed to provide care for our state, and this eliminated most of what was available, especially in the rural areas. Here in Albuquerque, 50% of the population of the whole state lives in this city. So in Albuquerque, people like me were kind of protected, but out in the rural areas, like everywhere else, the behavioral health system just collapsed. It was awful to our community. But I did get involved with Albuquerque Interfaith after that to make sure that the the 8 cent tax that was approved through our county and our our community was used to make sure that we use that money to rebuild those holes in the system where funding was, people were falling through the cracks to get care. It really became a place where I turned I turned it into action, much like my mother taught me to do when I was younger. That when you see a need in the community, you take your experience and you put it into action to make the world a better place. And so after the shakeup, through my involvement at the church, the First Unitarian Church, I joined Albuquerque Interfaith and tried to re repair the damage that had been done by our governor.
Wow. Oh my goodness. What a story. I've been talking to you for quite some time now, getting to know you. This is just so much. The personal struggle. This is also the dress during the time, right? Can you talk a little bit about that? And this is the renewing your vows for the 25th anniversary and how, you know, did you tie the theme into reclaiming yourself in a sense?
So one of the things I told you earlier in the story is how offended I was when Oprah came to our keynote address for the mental health center I worked for and talked about the dress she wore to the Oscars. And here I was, 25 years later, ready to renew my vows with my husband. He had gone through the Hoffman process and overcome some struggles with his depression. And we were renewing our vows at our 25-year wedding anniversary. But I had also worked for years over my recovery from compulsive overeating and lost the pounds, 125 pounds worth of
Wow.
weight that I was carrying on the day that I was married. And they had to put the side panels into the dress in order for me to wear the designer dress that I had bought for my wedding day. And so here I was at a size 18 instead of a size 24, 26. And I gathered all my girlfriends together and we took those side panels out of my old wedding dress and we made it a size 18 dress so that on
Wow.
my 25-year wedding anniversary, I could wear the dress as it was made, in the body that I had healed basically over these years by having a healthy relationship with food, with drugs, with alcohol, improving my relationship with my husband and my body, and my child. There's something amazing about having a child who looks just like you, and you realize how lovable you really are, and always were. And every time I look at my son and I see how much he is
Hmm.
like me, I see that self. And I found a way to say I'm comfortable in my body, and I renewed my commitment not just to my husband, but to myself.
Beautiful.
It
Oh
was
my goodness.
powerful.
Absolutely is powerful. And, renewing this commitment, my goodness. Are we on to part three? Or do you want to finish up a little more?
Sure. No, that's good.
All right. So the
That's good.
Hoffman process, what that is, breaking family patterns up next. And speaking of Chris, his journey seems pivotal to your own restorative process because you said he struggled, from severe depression for many years. Could you share a little bit about that with us?
While I was going through infertility and fear of trying to get pregnant again after the tubal pregnancies, my husband was also going through his own struggles. He
Yeah.
had struggled with depression since before I met him. He reported to me later on in our life that he had had his first, attempt to suicide when he was 9 years old. And
Ah,
so he struggled with depression throughout his life. And as we tried all these different things over the years, eventually he found his way into the Hoffman process. The Hoffman Institute is a 8-day intensive program where you basically take a look at your negative love patterns that you learned from your family of origin, and you learn how to disconnect those patterns from your authentic self, focusing on your intellect and your emotional self as well as your body and your spirit. So they talk about something called a quadrinity. So those four parts of the quadrinity are the aspects of yourself or the parts of yourself that need some healing in order to recover from some negative love patterns. Now, we have positive love patterns too, so we don't have to get rid of those. We just want to get rid of the negative love patterns. But after Chris went to the Hoffman process, he came back so different.
mm,
You could feel the difference in him. He went from a place of having fear-based dreams to
mm-hmm.
laughing in his sleep. For me, that was the most profound evidence of a subconscious change in how he felt about himself. It was just daunting to me to see that change in him.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And let's go back to 2017, right? That change to see that leading to you. Could you go over a little bit about the fix and quadrinity?
So I did go to, after seeing the change in my husband, I realized that there was a lot of negative love patterns I had learned from my own family of origin. And I decided to go to the Hoffman process to fix my own marriage. I really faced, though, some of my relationship patterns that I learned from my mother, my addictive patterns, the whole thing about keeping sister secrets and my mother's secrets. And I realized that early on in my life that I had used substance use as a way to connect with my sisters, especially my two middle sisters. Edie was always the sister who was on the healthy kick. Let's try this diet. Let's try this exercise. Let's have this positive attitude about ourselves, do prayer and meditation. She
Yeah.
had gone to OA meetings and she was impressed by OA, but that really wasn't the path that she took. She took a lot of the stuff that Oprah would talk about and apply them to her life. She was a psychologist. She really guided me towards healthy behavior. Whereas my other two sisters tended to be, when I lived with them and I was near them, a part of my addictive cycle. Smoking weed with my sister while we were ditching school when my mom was in treatment. I became the little sister that was supposed to keep everybody's secrets. And eventually I started stealing from those sisters in order to get high when we'd get together for our family gatherings. And I really believed that the only way I knew how to connect with one of my sisters was through smoking weed. And I had to stop myself from being that person with them. And it disrupted our ability because there was just too much conflict between us about whether they should or shouldn't when we were together, that it became a big enough problem that my sister Edie was like, I don't really want to even try to do this with all of you anymore. And the other two sisters had their own disruption with me. And so eventually I disconnected from those two sisters, and the one who's hosting Thanksgiving this week will have that with her kids and everybody there without me. And it's a very, very deep sadness that I have that I've lost that connection. I see how my negative patterns destroyed those relationships, and I hope someday to be forgiven and to be able to move on. But I also know that I've created my own family here. And so one of the things we will skip over to is that experience that I'm talking about at the Bluegrass Festival. That this was the one that really just deeply, I am like really proud to tell the story that I overheard, but I overheard it because I was too stoned to
Yeah.
get off the couch, to listen to my cousin tell the story to
Hmm.
my older sisters about how they helped him start the first ever Telluride Bluegrass Festival. And I laid there on the couch listening to this story that I just really wanted to be a part of, but I couldn't get off the couch because I was so stoned. I felt like I was asleep, but I could hear what they were talking about. And it's one of my biggest regrets.
Uh,
So in that situation, restorative justice isn't just about the legal courts. It's about restoring my own self-integrity. It was at that moment that I realized that I needed to do something different about my relationship with cannabis and my sisters because I couldn't control it with them. And eventually, when I set those boundaries, it ended my relationship with those sisters who still participate in that as a day-to-day part of their life.
uh,
I was still married to a man who was allergic to smoke. I was still working on my relationship with him and trying to stay clean and sober. And so I couldn't have it in my life. And so I
uh,
had to disconnect.
got it. Well, we are just about out of time. In our last 2 minutes, how did you want to kind of finish off?
Well, one of those things that I was talking about earlier about how I learned this pattern from my mother about when you need something in your life, You create it in the community. And I saw my mother do that for me as a child. Like she'd be the 4-H leader or she'd be the Girl Scout leader. If she wanted us to have something, she'd create an opportunity for us to have it. So in my life, when I came back from the Hoffman process, I started a graduate group for Hoffman graduates. And I
Mm-hmm.
started a parenting group to support me in parenting. And when I need connection, I realized that I don't have to rely on these people that I was born into this family. I can create an extended family through the people who share my values. And so I got more and more involved over the years with the Unitarian Church here in town. I just keep making sure that I'm responsible for creating the kind of life that I want to live. And I'm not responsible for how other people react to my truth, my experience. For me, restorative justice is restoring my trust in my own resilience.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
I am my
All right. How can we reach out to you? I'm looking forward to chatting more next week.
Sure. You can find the website with the previous episodes on my relationship with Oprah.com. And my website for counseling is lisajjohnsonlmft.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You have a fantastic day and looking forward to the next time we connect. Thank you and have a happy and healthy Thanksgiving, okay?
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You too.
And
Gobble
hopefully we'll
gobble.
talk to Edie next time or soon. Bye-bye.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.